Today we're going to talk about the untold story of ancient humans in the Mediterranean. The reason this is an untold story is because most people don't know about it. But we now have pretty compelling evidence that points towards the fact that ancient humans colonized much of the Mediterranean, not just Europe and North Africa, but the islands in between. And we have really good evidence for this from both sides. We've got evidence from the land bridge of Anatolia into Greece and also from Sicily into North Africa. I'm going to start out looking at the evidence for early colonization of the Aegean Islands, specifically the island of Crete. But before I get to that, let's set the stage by talking about the land bridge that connected Anatolia with Greece. This is what that area looked like around 20,000 years ago. During the last glacial maximum, ice sheets covered much of northern Europe, and the Eurasian landmass was a lot drier than it is today. So there would have been less water in the Mediterranean, which would have exposed this land bridge between Anatolia and Greece. And it's possible that during the last glacial maximum, you could have walked or hunted animals across this land bridge. And in fact, there is some evidence that humans were doing exactly that. There's a cave in southern Turkey called the Karayan Cave, and this cave has been occupied multiple times over the last 40,000 years. But there was one occupation there that dates back to around 20,000 years ago, and it was during the last glacial maximum. And it appears that the people who lived there came from the east. They came over the land bridge from what is today Iran. And we know this because they brought sheep with them, and those sheep had distinctive traits that are only found in the sheep from that region of Iran today. So it seems like there was a group of humans who migrated from Iran through Anatolia and then into the Karayan Cave in southern Turkey. And again, this was around 20,000 years ago. Now keep that date in mind because we're going to come back to that later on. But for now, let's move our attention to Greece and specifically the island of Crete. On the island of Crete, there is a site called Akrotiri. And at Akrotiri, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of occupation from around 20,000 years ago, which is the same time period that we see evidence of occupation in the Karayan Cave in Turkey. At Akrotiri, archaeologists discovered stone tools, animal bones, and other artifacts. And many of the animal bones show signs of butchery, which indicates that ancient humans were living there, hunting animals and butchering them and using them for food. In addition to the archaeological evidence, there is also genetic evidence that suggests that humans colonized the island of Crete around 20,000 years ago. A team of scientists led by Iosif Lazaridis from the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, Germany conducted a study in 2019 to reconstruct the history of human migration in the Mediterranean. They analyzed the DNA of ancient humans from various sites in the Mediterranean, including Crete. Their analysis revealed that the ancestors of the modern-day Cretans were a mixture of two distinct populations, one from Anatolia and one from the eastern Mediterranean. The people from Anatolia migrated to Crete around 20,000 years ago, bringing with them the cultural traditions of the early Natufian people. The Natufian culture is considered to be the earliest known culture in the Levant region, and it flourished between 15,000 and 12,000 years ago. It is characterized by a distinctive pottery style and a range of sophisticated technologies. The Natufian people were also among the first to domesticate plants and animals, and this may have played a role in their ability to colonize new areas. The second population that contributed to the genetic makeup of the Cretans came from the eastern Mediterranean. These people arrived in Crete around 13,000 years ago, bringing with them the cultural traditions of the Khiam culture. The Khiam culture was a late Mesolithic culture that flourished in Cyprus and the Levant region, and it is known for its distinctive arrowheads and other small stone tools. So according to the genetic evidence, ancient humans colonized the island of Crete around 20,000 years ago, and this is the same time period that we see evidence of occupation in the Karayan Cave in Turkey. And both of these events occurred during the last glacial maximum when the sea levels were lower and the Mediterranean was largely a desert. In fact, Scientists believe that the Mediterranean was largely uninhabited during this time period because it was too dry and too hot to support large populations. But all of that changed around 14,000 years ago when the climate began to shift. As the climate warmed, the glaciers began to melt and the sea levels rose. This led to the formation of the Aegean Sea and the separation of the island of Crete from Anatolia. As the sea levels continued to rise, the Mediterranean transformed into the body of water that we know today. This event, known as the Holocene flooding of the Mediterranean, is believed to have caused a mass extinction of plant and animal species in the region. But it also created new opportunities for the humans who had colonized the islands. With the rising sea levels, the islands became isolated from each other and from the mainland. This isolation allowed the humans on Crete to develop their own unique culture and way of life. And it was during this time period that the Cretan civilization flourished. But what did that civilization look like? Well, unfortunately, we don't have much evidence of it because it was submerged around 10,000 years ago when the sea level rose another 200 feet. But we do have some evidence from a place called Sycro. Sycro is a Bronze Age settlement on the island of Crete that dates back to around 3700 BCE, but archaeologists have also found evidence of earlier occupation at the site. One of the most interesting artifacts found at Sycro is a burial urn that contains the cremated remains of a woman and her infant child. The urn dates back to around 8000 BCE, which makes it nearly 10,000 years old. The cremation burial pattern is similar to what we see at other sites in the Mediterranean, such as Tel Saf in Israel, which dates back to around 9000 BC. This suggests that the practice of cremation may have been common in the Mediterranean during the late Mesolithic and early Neolithic periods. Another interesting find at Sycro is a small stone structure that dates back to around 6000 BCE. The structure resembles a primitive hut and may have been used for ritualistic purposes. This is one of the earliest examples of architecture ever found on the island of Crete. Taken together, the archaeological and genetic evidence paints a picture of a fascinating and complex history for the island of Crete. It was first colonized by humans around 20,000 years ago during the last glacial maximum, and it remained inhabited throughout the Holocene period. During the late Mesolithic and early Neolithic periods, the Cretans developed their own unique culture, which was influenced by the Natafians and the Khiam people. And it wasn't until the Bronze Age that we start to see evidence of more permanent settlements on the island. But sadly, much of this early history has been lost to the rising sea levels. All right, so let's move on and talk about evidence for colonization from the island of Sicily to North Africa. The first humans arrived in Sicily around 13,000 years ago, bringing with them the cultural traditions of the Elmiran culture. The Elmiran culture was a late Mesolithic culture that flourished in southern Italy and Sicily, and it is known for its distinctive bone and ivory artifacts. But it appears that these people were not the first humans to reach Sicily. There is evidence that humans may have reached the island even earlier, perhaps as early as 15,000 years ago. One piece of evidence for this comes from the island of Marettimo, where archaeologists have discovered flint-knapping waste that dates back to around 15,000 years ago. The artifacts found on Marettimo are similar to those found at other sites in the Mediterranean, such as Grotta de l'Amadou in France and Ta'anak in Israel, which date back to around 15,000 years ago. This suggests that humans may have reached Marettimo around the same time they were reaching these other areas. During the last glacial maximum, when the Mediterranean was largely a desert and it was possible to walk or hunt animals across the land bridge from what is today Spain. Another piece of evidence for early human habitation in Sicily comes from the analysis of ancient DNA. In a study published in 2021, a team of scientists led by Cristian Capelli from the University of South Bohemia in České Budějovice, Czech Republic, analyzed the DNA of ancient humans from various sites in Europe. Their analysis revealed that the ancestors of the Sicilians were a mixture of three distinct populations, one from the Iberian Peninsula, one from the Near East, and one from the Balkans. The people from the Iberian Peninsula migrated to Sicily around 15,000 years ago, bringing with them the cultural traditions of the Elmiran culture. The people from the Near East arrived in Sicily around 12,000 years ago, bringing with them the cultural traditions of the Khiam culture. And the people from the Balkans arrived in Sicily around 10,000 years ago, bringing with them the cultural traditions of the Starcevo culture. The Starcevo culture was an early Neolithic culture that flourished in the Balkans, and it is known for its distinctive pottery style. So according to the genetic evidence, the first humans colonized the island of Sicily around 15,000 years ago. But this is only part of the story because the genetic evidence also shows that there was a second wave of migration to Sicily around 12,000 years ago. This second wave of migrants came from the Near East, and they brought with them the cultural traditions of the Khiam people. But we also have evidence of a third wave of migrants coming from the Balkans around 10,000 years ago. These migrants brought with them the cultural traditions of the Starcevo people, and they intermixed with the previous inhabitants of Sicily. This mixing of cultures is evident in the archaeological record. For example, the Ciempozuelos culture, which dates back to around 9000 BC, is a mixture of the Elmiran and Kim cultures. The Ciempozuelos culture is known for its distinctive pottery style and its small settlements. Another example is the Al-Khan culture, which dates back to around 7500 BC. The Al-Khan culture is known for its distinctive houses and its advanced knowledge of agriculture. Taken together, the archaeological and genetic evidence paints a picture of a fascinating and complex history for the island of Sicily. It was first colonized by humans around 15,000 years ago, and it remained inhabited throughout the Holocene period. During the late Mesolithic and early Neolithic periods, the Sicilians developed their own unique culture, which was influenced by the Elmiran, Khiam, and Starcevo people. And it wasn't until the Bronze Age that we start to see evidence of more permanent settlements on the island. But sadly, much of this early history has been lost to the rising sea levels. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please give me a like and subscribe.